My name is Jade Harrington. I grew up in Baltimore. My mother taught second grade for 30 years. My father fixed engines, the kind of work where you come home with grease under your nails and never once complain about it. I was the first person in my family to go to law school. I graduated second in my class. And for 5 years, I worked 70-hour weeks at one of the most prestigious commercial law firms in the country because I wanted to prove that someone like me, someone who came from where I came from, could build something that lasted. I was not looking for a billionaire. I was not looking for a love story. I was looking for a red file. It started with a text message. Tuesday night, 11:47 p.m. I was at my desk, cold coffee on my left, 2 monitors full of contract language on my right, and 14 months of work sitting 3 signatures away from closing. The Velour Noir deal. A $90 million co-branding partnership that I had built from a handshake into a legal framework through nothing but preparation and stubbornness. Then my phone lit up. Unknown number. 1 message. The red file isn't yours to find. Walk away before Thursday. I read it twice. Then I blocked the number and went back to work. I should not have done that. The next morning, a manila envelope arrived at my firm. No return address. No postage mark. Hand delivered, according to the front desk. Inside was a single photograph. My managing partner, Gerald Whitmore, shaking hands with a man I did not immediately recognize. Clipped to the photograph was a sticky note with 4 characters written in blue ink. KPF 202409. I am a lawyer. I know how to sit with information without jumping to conclusions, so I sat with it. I ran the abbreviation quietly, alone, at my desk. Kang Philanthropy Foundation. Board Resolution 2024-09. A vote scheduled for Thursday. $42 million. A family I had never met. A war I did not know I was already standing inside. I did not know then that my name had already been written into someone else's plan. I did not know that 6 weeks earlier, I had been photographed in an airport terminal walking near a man I did not even register was there. I did not know that a private intelligence firm had compiled a 12-page report on me. My work, my firm, my proximity to a deal that touched the edges of a world I thought I was only observing from the outside. Someone had been watching me for months, and I had no idea. Someone wanted me to find that file before Thursday. What I did not know yet was that someone also wanted to use me to start a war. Quick question before we continue. Do you think love can be real when money is involved? Yes or no? Comment, yes or no. Subscribe, because this story is about to prove someone wrong, and tell us where you are watching from. I went to that meeting on Wednesday evening, telling myself it was professional. A source had contacted me through a mutual connection, someone who claimed to have the full file, the real documentation behind KPF 202409. I chose a private members club in the financial district because it was neutral ground, public enough to feel safe, quiet enough to talk. I arrived at 7:15. I scanned the room. My source was not there. What I found instead was a man sitting alone at a corner table, reading a physical book, completely unbothered by the fact that nearly every person in that room was angled toward him. Not staring, that would have been too obvious. Just aware. The way people get aware when someone important walks into a space and pretends not to notice the effect. I noticed the book first. Worn paperback. James Baldwin. Giovanni's room. Then he looked up. He was not what I expected. The business press called Seo-jun Kang cold and calculating. The gossip columns made him into a playboy. The financial analysts called him a cipher. All inherited status. No real vision of his own. I had read 3 of those profiles in the 40 minutes before I left my office. None of those people had ever sat across from him. He closed the book without marking his page, and he looked at me with the kind of calm that does not come from confidence. It comes from someone who has spent years deciding exactly how much of themselves to show in any given room. "You're not my contact," he said, "but something tells me you're relevant." I told him I was looking for a file. He told me the file had already been moved. I asked him how he knew about it. He said he had placed a trace on it since September. I sat down. Because a man who has been quietly tracking the same file you just found on a sticky note at 11:47 on a Tuesday night is not a coincidence. He was never a coincidence. And that, right there, is where my life changed. Before I even knew it was changing. Did you feel that? 1 minute she is chasing a file. My next minute she is sitting across from the most powerful unmarried man in East Asia, and neither of them planned it. If you were Jade, would you trust him right now or walk straight out that door? Comment, trust or walk. Like this video. Subscribe if you are new, because the next chapter reveals exactly what Seo-jun Kang has been hiding, and why finding that file may have already put Jade in more danger than she realizes. I did not sleep that night. Not because I was afraid, because I was thinking. There is a difference, and I have learned to know which one is keeping me awake. Seo-jun had told me the file had a trace on it since September. That meant someone inside the foundation had been leaking movement on that document for months. Not to the press, not to a regulator, to him, privately. Which meant either he had a source inside his own family's philanthropy board, or he was the source, feeding information to himself through a channel his father could not see. I did not know yet which one was true, but I knew it mattered. I was back at my desk by 6 a.m. At 6:47, my phone screen filled up with a news alert. Breaking. Kang Empire in crisis. Secret marriage surfaces, threatening $3 billion dynasty. I read it once, then I read it again, slowly, the way you read something when your brain is refusing to accept what your eyes are showing it. The photograph was grainy. Airport terminal. A woman in a black blazer walking beside Seo-jun Kang. Her face partially turned. The caption read, "Mystery wife? Sources confirm secret union." The woman was me. I knew exactly when that photograph was taken. 6 weeks ago. A business trip to close preliminary terms on the Velour Noir deal. I had walked through that terminal thinking about contract language. I had not even registered that he was there. Someone had registered it for me. By 7 a.m., I had 17 missed calls, none from anyone I trusted. My firm's main line was already ringing. I stood in the stairwell of my building with my coat still on and my bag still over my shoulder, and I read every word of that article twice more. Then I found something, buried in the 4th paragraph. One line. Sources close to the Rhee family confirmed the union was formalized quietly. The Rhee family. Not a journalist source, not a business contact. The Rhee family had confirmed it. The same family connected to the foundation vote scheduled for Thursday. I did not issue a denial. I did not call a single journalist back. A lawyer who speaks before she understands is a lawyer who loses. I needed to understand first. Seo-jun's message came through a secure channel at 2 p.m. Not a phone call. A message through an encrypted legal communications platform, the kind that firms use for sensitive case documentation. Which meant he had my professional credentials. Which meant he had done his homework long before Wednesday evening. The message was 4 sentences. This was not random. You were chosen because of your proximity to the Velour Noir deal and a 6-week-old airport photograph. I have the full report on how it was built. Come to Marries Tower tonight. Ask for Mrs. O. I stood in my office stairwell and read it 3 times. Then I went. The Marries Tower penthouse occupies the entire 72nd floor, and you do not get there without a passphrase. The security desk called upstairs when I arrived, and a woman's voice came through the speaker, measured, unhurried, the voice of someone who has managed powerful people long enough to be unimpressed by all of them. "Blue Lotus, second frost," she said. "You may come up." Mrs. O met me at the elevator. She did not smile. She did not need to. She led me through a space that had stopped trying to impress people years ago. Clean lines, quiet air, the kind of wealth that no longer needed an audience. Seo-jun was waiting in a side room with a document open on the table. 12 pages. A compiled surveillance and strategy report. I could see the header from where I stood. Produced by a private intelligence firm and commissioned by a senior Rhee family attorney 4 months ago. And my name appeared on page 3. He let me read it. All of it. He did not explain or interpret. He simply waited. When I finished, I looked up and said, "They built this around me specifically." He said, "Yes." "They needed someone credible enough to hold the story for 48 hours. "Yes." "Just long enough for the vote." "Yes." I set the report down. I looked around the room, and that was when I noticed it. A door on the far wall, painted jade green, slightly different from every other surface in that carefully controlled space. I did not ask about it, but I looked at it for 1 second longer than I should have. And Seo-jun noticed. He crossed the room without a word and opened it. Let me tell you about 2 versions of the same Thursday. The one I lived through, and the one I only understood afterward. That morning, I was in my office at 7:30, reviewing the Rhee family's public foundation filings, cross-referencing donor records against the dates on the surveillance report Seo-jun had shown me the night before. I was building a timeline. Quietly. The way you build something when you are not yet sure what it is going to prove. My assistant knocked at 8:15 and told me a car was waiting downstairs. I had not called a car. The driver handed me a card through the window. Cream stock, heavy weight, 4 words printed in clean black type. Kang Tae-jin, 10 o'clock. Now let me tell you what I did not know that morning. What I only pieced together later. Sitting in my apartment with the lights off, and a sealed envelope on the table in front of me. Earlier that same week, while I was still treating the text message as spam and the manila envelope as a puzzle, Kang Tae-jin had already received a full briefing on the Rhee family's scheme. Not a partial report. The complete picture. The surveillance file with my name on page 3. The fabricated photograph. The governance clause they planned to trigger. The 48-hour window. He had known for 2 weeks, and he had chosen not to stop it. I did not know that at 10 o'clock when I walked into his private office, smaller than I expected, books on every wall, a desk that looked like it had been used for 40 years and intended for 40 more. He did not stand when I entered. He looked at me for a long moment with dark, evaluating eyes and said, "You remind me of someone." He placed something on the desk between us. A jewelry box. A lacquered wood inlaid with mother-of-pearl, Korean, old, and clearly precious, in a way that had nothing to do with money. He told me it had belonged to his late wife, that she had carried it from Seoul in 1971 when she was 19 years old. Inside was a sealed envelope. On the front, in her handwriting, were words he translated quietly without being asked. "To the woman my son will one day love." He slid it across the desk toward me, and I sat there thinking, this man knew what was coming for me. He let it come anyway. So why was he handing me something this sacred? Now we have a real dilemma. A father who let the storm hit his own son, now handing a stranger the most private thing his family owns. If you could protect your family, but it meant exposing the man you love, would you expose him? Comment, expose, or protect. Subscribe. Because the next chapter brings a phone call that changes everything. I left Tae-jin's office holding that envelope and one unanswered question. I did not open it in the elevator. I did not open it in the car. I put it in the inside pocket of my blazer, directly against my chest, and I carried it like something that required more certainty than I currently had. That certainty arrived 2 hours later, and it did not come from Tae-jin. It came from a compliance summary sitting in my secure messages when I returned to my office. 12 pages. Sender listed as a third-party legal review firm I did not recognize. No cover note, just the document. I read it once fast, then once slow. Or it was a retained agreements audit, cross-referencing Whitmore and Cross's active client roster against Foundation-adjacent entities over the previous 18 months. And there, on page 7, in clean black type that had no interest in softening what it was saying, was Gerald Whitmore's name attached to a quiet secondary retainer, paid by a Rhee family holding company. My managing partner, the man who had approved my assignment to the Velour Noir deal, the man who had shaken hands in that photograph I pulled from a manila envelope on a Wednesday morning. He had been theirs the entire time. I sat with that for 60 seconds. Then I picked up my phone. Seo-jun answered on the second ring. I did not raise my voice. I did not need to. And I said, "You sent me this report?" He said, "Yes." I said, "You knew about Whitmore before you showed me the surveillance file." A pause. Then, "Yes." I said, "How long?" He said, "Since October." October. 3 months before the headline ran. I said, "You watched me walk into that building every day for 3 months, knowing my own managing partner was working against the same case you were investigating." He said, "I needed to know if you were part of it." That sentence landed like a stone in still water. Because I understood it. I am a lawyer. I know what due diligence requires. I know what it means to verify before you trust. But understanding something and accepting it are two different things. I told him I needed 24 hours. He said he would give me whatever I needed. Then he said one more thing. Quiet. Unhurried. With none of his usual precision. "There is a name on page 11. Not Whitmore. Someone you have not looked at yet. Look at it tonight." I looked, and the name I found on page 11 was not the Rhee family. It was mine. They set a trap for me. And he walked right into it, because they built it around someone he trusted. The invitation arrived Friday morning. Embossed card, hand-delivered, no RSVP required. A private reception hosted by the Kang Philanthropy Foundation's Arts Committee. Cocktail hour, Marries Tower, 44th floor, 6 p.m. I almost did not go. Then I remembered the name on page 11. The room was exactly what you would expect from old money performing new generosity. Soft lighting, champagne on silver trays, abstract art on every wall with no price tags because the price tags were not the point. And I arrived at 6:15 and stood near the east window with sparkling water and my full attention. Gerald Whitmore was already there. That was turning point 1. He was not on the Foundation's Arts Committee. He had no professional reason to be in that room. But there he was, near the back, speaking quietly with a woman I recognized from the Rhee family's public board listings. Director of External Affairs. They were looking at something on his phone. He angled it away when he noticed me noticing. I did not react. I kept my expression exactly where it was, and I started moving through the room slowly, the way you move when you want people to think you are doing nothing. Near the catering station, I passed a Foundation PR assistant fumbling with a folder. Pages slipped. I helped gather them. In that 3-second window, I saw the top sheet, an internal guest briefing. My name was listed under a column labeled Unconfirmed Attendance. I had been expected whether or not I accepted. Near the elevator bank, I found a voice note situation. A Foundation coordinator speaking into her phone, low and fast, not realizing I was 2 steps behind her. She came. Tell him she came. The photo team is on the east side. Tell them now. Photo team. That was turning point 2. I did not leave. Leaving was what they needed. A hurried exit, caught on camera, looking guilty of something I could not name. Instead, I walked directly to Seo-jun, who had arrived at 6:30, composed and unaware, and I put my hand on his arm and said quietly, close enough that no camera angle would catch my expression, There is a photo team on the east side. And do not look. Walk with me toward the north exit, and whatever you do not let go of my arm." He did not hesitate. He held on. The trap worked, just not the way they planned. The photograph ran Saturday morning, but instead of showing Jade Harrington fleeing a Kang Foundation event looking compromised, it showed the two of us walking together, unhurried, his hand covering mine on his arm, her expression calm, his jaw set. The caption tried to frame it as confirmation of the marriage rumor. What it actually looked like was a united front. By noon, the image had been shared 22,000 times. By 2 p.m., Seo-jun's communications team had issued nothing. No denial, no statement, because a denial would have given the story oxygen. Silence, in this case, was the correct legal posture. I had advised that at 10 a.m., we're sitting across from him in the Marries Tower conference room with the full red file open between us. That was when Reveal 1 landed. Buried in the financial documentation, 11 years of foundation donor records, was a recurring wire transfer. Quarterly. Consistent. Originating from a holding company 3 layers removed from Whitmore and Cross. Gerald Whitmore had not just been feeding information to the Rhee family, he had been partially funded by them. His retainer was not secondary counsel. It was a control position. He had been there since before I joined the firm. 14 months of my work, built inside a structure that was designed to be used against the people I was unknowingly adjacent to. I closed the folder. I said nothing for a moment. Then Seo-jun said, "There is something else. You page 43. I turned to page 43, and that was Reveal 2. 4 years before the Velour Noir deal, a maritime compliance hearing, a mid-level case, a subsidiary dispute, nothing that made major headlines. A junior associate at a small firm had submitted a third-party legal brief challenging a Kang Group subsidiary's import documentation. That junior associate was me. I had not connected it. The subsidiary name was 3 holding layers removed from the Kang Group brand. I had taken the case for the experience. I had done my job thoroughly, and the brief had been used to issue a compliance correction. Seo-jun had found it in October. That was why he had traced me. Not just because of the airport photograph, because I had, 4 years ago, I unknowingly filed a brief that cost his family's subsidiary a 60-day operational pause. He had needed to know if I held a grudge. I looked at him across that table and said, "You have been investigating me since October, and you still opened the door." He said, "The door was always going to be yours." Before I could respond, my phone screen lit up on the table between us. A message from an unknown number. 7 words. "Walk away now or the brief goes public." The moment power shifts, it does not announce itself. It just quietly moves. And you only feel it when you reach for something that used to be there and find your hand closing around air. Resolution K, PF 202409 passed unanimously at 9:14 a.m. I was not in the room. I was in a coffee shop 4 blocks from the Marries Tower, on both hands around a cup I had stopped drinking 20 minutes earlier, watching the vote confirmation come through on my phone like a notification for something ordinary. It was not ordinary. The Rhee family's 11 years of financial misdirection had been submitted to the board 20 minutes before the vote. Fraud does not survive sunlight. The resolution passed. The funding was suspended pending investigation. And the governance clause they had built their entire scheme around, the one designed to freeze Seo-jun's voting rights, was never triggered. Because Jade Harrington had never married anyone. The story was a fabrication. The photograph was a fabrication. And now the board knew it. I should have felt relieved. Instead, I sat in that coffee shop thinking about a man who had known for 2 weeks and said nothing. Who had handed me a dead woman's letter like it was an explanation. Who had let his son's name run through every business channel in the country because he calculated that the fallout would be useful. Kang Tae-jin had been right, strategically. The scandal had drawn out the opposition. The red file had surfaced. The vote had gone exactly as he needed, and Seo-jun had not spoken to his father in 9 days. He called me that afternoon. Not about the vote, not about the file or the legal proceedings or the 7-word threat that had arrived on my phone the night before. He called and said 4 words first. "Are you all right?" I did not answer immediately, because the honest answer required more trust than I had confirmed I was ready to give. I sat with the question for 3 full seconds, which is a long time, on a phone call, in silence. Then I said, "No one has asked me that in a long time." He said, "I know. I should have asked sooner." And something I had been holding tightly in my chest, something I had not even named yet, shifted. Not gone, just different. The way things feel when someone finally says the right thing at the right moment and you realize you had been waiting for it without knowing. 4 days after the vote, Gerald Whitmore called a firm-wide meeting. I did not attend. I had already drafted my resignation the morning the compliance audit surfaced his name. I had not submitted it yet, not because I was uncertain, but because timing in law is everything, and I was not going to hand anyone a narrative they could use. I waited until the Rhee family's legal exposure was formally documented and in the hands of the Foundation's independent auditors. Then I submitted it at 5 p.m. on a Thursday, by email, with a read receipt. Whitmore called twice that evening. I let it go to voicemail both times. What I did instead was close the Velour Noir deal. 14 months of work, submitted from a laptop in my apartment, representing myself as independent counsel on the final signature round. The brand's legal team had called me directly the morning after the vote. My name recognition had shifted from liability to leverage overnight, and they were practical people who understood what that meant. The deal closed at 3:17 p.m., $90 million. My name on the closing document as lead counsel. No firm, no managing partner, no one's permission required. I called my mother from the parking lot of nowhere in particular and said, "It closed." She went quiet for a moment and then said, "Your father would have driven somewhere just to tell a stranger." We laughed. I cried a little. I did not tell her about the rest of it yet. That evening, a package arrived at my apartment. No note. A first edition copy of a Toni Morrison novel, Song of Solomon, with a small piece of paper tucked inside the front cover. Not a message, just a date. Saturday, 10 a.m. I knew who sent it. I knew what the date meant. What I did not know was that the same evening, a Rhee family attorney had filed an emergency motion with the Foundation's oversight body. Not about the fraud investigation, but about the board vote itself. They were contesting the submission of the red file on procedural grounds. I'm arguing that the documentation had been obtained through unauthorized surveillance. If the motion held, the vote could be reviewed. If the vote was reviewed, everything we had done, everything I had burned my career to the ground to accomplish, could be undone before the ink dried. My phone lit up. Seo-jun. One message. "Don't respond to anything tonight. I need to show you something Saturday." What lesson hit you the most here? Was it about trust, pride, or patience? Comment trust, pride, or patience. Subscribe, because the next episode tests all 3 at once. Saturday morning arrived cold and clear. Seo-jun picked me up himself. No driver, no security detail trailing 2 cars back. Just him, the nocturne black Bugatti, and an address he typed into the navigation without explaining. I did not ask where we were going. I watched the city change outside the window. Financial district giving way to older streets, wider buildings, neighborhoods that had been something different before the money arrived. He parked on a side street in front of a building with no signage. 8 stories. Clean but unremarkable. The kind of building that does not want to be noticed. We took the stairs to the rooftop. What was up there had nothing to do with the Kang group. A covered reading area. 2 chairs facing east. A small table with a French press, and 2 cups already prepared, which meant someone knew we were coming, or he had been here recently enough that the setup was still his rhythm. We stayed for 2 hours. He told me about his mother in a way I had not heard before. Not the memorial version, not the official biography, the real one. A woman who sketched on hotel notepads during business trips because she had no studio. Who kept a Korean radio station playing in the kitchen because silence in a foreign country felt like erasure. I told him about my father, the engine work, the specific sound of the garage door at 6 a.m., the way he used to leave notes inside my textbooks when I was studying for the bar. Not advice, just sentences like, "You already know this, and eat something." We were quiet for a while after that. And then I did something I had not planned. I noticed his phone on the table between us, screen down, and when a notification vibrated it face up for 1 second. I saw the name at the top of the screen before it locked again. Rhee Soo-yeon. Not a business contact name, not a legal alias, a personal name. And the preview text beneath it, visible for less than 3 seconds, read 4 words before the screen went dark. She knows about the... He picked up the phone immediately, turned it back over. His expression did not change. His hand was completely steady, but he had seen me see it, and he said nothing. That was the moment I understood. There was a version of this story he had not shown me yet. Not a small omission. Something structural. Something that had been true the entire time. And Rhee Soo-yeon was part of it. I did not confront him on the rooftop. I know that surprises people. But I am a lawyer. I do not move on incomplete information. I noted what I saw. I filed it, and I kept my face exactly where it needed to be for the rest of the morning. On the drive back, I asked him one question. Is there anything connected to the Rhee family that you have not shown me? He was quiet for 4 full seconds. Then, there is one thing I was waiting for the right moment to explain. I said, the moment is now. He pulled the car over. Rhee Soo-yeon was not just a family name on the opposing side of a foundation vote. She was Seo-jun's former fiancé. Arranged informally between the 2 families in 2019, never formalized, never announced publicly, dissolved by mutual agreement in 2021 when the Kang and Rhee families began their dispute over the Westmount Academy Alumni Council position. She had not disappeared. She had become the Rhee family's internal strategist. The scheme, the photograph, the fabricated marriage rumor, the surveillance file with my name on page 3, had been her architecture. Not her father's. Hers. I sat with that for a long moment. Then I said, "She built the trap." He said, "Yes." I said, "And you knew it was her since October." He said, "Yes." I said, "Is that why you needed to verify me? Because the last woman connected to your name was the one currently trying to destroy it?" He did not answer that. He did not need to. I understood then that the investigation, the traced file, the 40 minutes waiting in my parking garage, rather than sending a driver, none of it had been purely strategic. It had been the behavior of someone who had been used once by someone close and was determined never to repeat the experience. That was the second truth, the one that reframed everything. He had not been evaluating me coldly. He had been protecting himself the only way he knew how. Carefully, quietly, and at a cost he absorbed alone. I opened my bag and took out the sealed envelope. His mother's letter. The one Tae-jin had slid across the desk 12 days ago. I had been carrying it since that meeting. I held it out to him. He looked at it for a long moment without taking it. Then he said, very quietly, "I think that one belongs to you." And I thought, what do you do with a man who gives you the most dangerous thing he owns and calls it a gift? There are moments when you look back at everything that happened and realize the timeline was wrong the whole time. Not the facts. The facts were accurate. But the order, who knew what and when and why they waited, that was the part I had been reading incorrectly. It started with a phone call I was not supposed to receive. A junior associate at the Foundation's oversight body called my new office number on a Tuesday morning. She asked if I had received the filing notification for Board Resolution KPF-2024-11. I told her I had not. She apologized, said there must have been a system delay, and hung up before I could ask her anything else. I pulled the resolution within the hour. It was 4 pages. Clean language, administrative framing, the kind of document that is designed to look routine so that people do not read it carefully enough. The proposal was simple on the surface: a structural reorganization of the Foundation's independent legal review process, attaching all external counsel to a newly created Kang Family Trust Oversight Committee. My name was listed in the appendix as proposed lead independent counsel. I read it twice. Then I understood what it actually was. On paper, it elevated my role. In practice, it placed my independent practice under the indirect governance of the Kang Group Charter. Every decision I made as independent counsel would require sign-off from a committee that reported to Tae-jin. It did not remove my independence loudly. It simply built a ceiling over it quietly. And the filing date was the part that changed everything. Resolution KPF 2024-11 had been filed 6 days ago. 4 days before Saturday. Before the rooftop. Before Seo-jun told me about Rhee Soo-yeon. Before he handed me his mother's letter and said it belonged to me. He had been sitting across from me on that rooftop knowing this resolution existed. And he had said nothing. I sat in my office for a long time after that. Not angry. Not yet. Something quieter and more precise than anger. The feeling you get when a pattern you trusted reveals a gap you did not see coming. I did not call him. I pulled every document connected to the new resolution instead. The authorized signatory on the filing was not the Foundation's legal team. It was Kang Tae-jin's personal attorney, which meant Tae-jin had moved without telling his son. Or that was what I was supposed to believe. Seo-jun found out the same way I did. Not from his father, not from the Foundation's legal team. From a news alert, a financial industry newsletter that had picked up the resolution filing as a footnote in a broader piece about Kang Group governance restructuring. He called me 11 minutes after the alert ran. I answered on the 4th ring. He said, I did not know. I said, I know. He said, how do you know? I said, because if you had known, you would have told me on the rooftop. You were already carrying enough that day. You would not have added this. Silence. Then, I am going to my father. I said, I know that too. What happened in that meeting between Seo-jun and Tae-jin, I learned afterward from Mrs. O, who had been present for the beginning of it before Seo-jun asked her to leave, and who told me what she heard in the quiet, factual way she delivered all information. Seo-jun had walked into his father's office without an appointment, and without managing his tone for the first time in 32 years. He told Tae-jin that filing a resolution that restructured Jade's independent practice without her knowledge or consent was not governance, or it was control dressed as protection. And he was done pretending those two things were the same. Tae-jin listened. He did not concede immediately, but he listened in a way he had not listened before, without preparing his counter-argument while the other person was still speaking. Mrs. O said the room was very quiet for a long time after Seo-jun finished. Tae-jin withdrew the resolution 48 hours later. No explanation filed with the board. No public statement. Just a withdrawal notice, clean and without elaboration. Then he called me directly. I owe you an apology. I am not practiced at those. I will keep it short. You were right. He hung up before I could respond. I stood in my new office, my name on the door, my rules on the wall, and I thought about a man who built a $3 billion dynasty and had somehow never learned to ask permission. And then I thought about his son, who had walked into that office and demanded it on my behalf, before I had asked him to, before I had even decided if I wanted him to. There is a particular kind of quiet that comes after everything settles. Not peace, not relief, just the absence of noise. And suddenly you can hear every question you were too busy to ask while the storm was still moving. I sat in my office on a Sunday morning with the city 40 stories below me and the sealed letter open on my desk. I had finally read it the night before. Alone. Slowly. With no one waiting for my reaction. She had written it in 2003 in careful, deliberate English, a second language she had clearly loved. It was not long. It was not dramatic. It was simply honest, in the way that people become honest when they are writing something they know they will not be alive to explain. She wrote about her son the way my father used to leave notes in my textbooks, not describing who he was, describing who he was trying to become, and how much that trying had cost him in a family that measured everything. She wrote, "Love him in the direction he is already moving, not the direction you need him to go." I folded the letter carefully and held it for a long time, because I knew, reading those words, that I was already in this, not falling, already there. And that was the part that frightened me. Not the Rhee family, not the board, not the career I had rebuilt from scratch. The part that frightened me was how much I stood to lose if I let this be real, and it turned out the weight of his family was simply too much for anything real to survive inside. What would you protect if you could only choose one? Love, power, or peace? Comment. Love, power, or peace? I need to know I am not the only one who cannot answer that easily. Seo-jun called at noon. He did not ask about the letter. He asked if I had eaten. I said yes, which was almost true. He said he was on the rooftop, that it had started raining lightly from the east, that he was not going to ask me to come, but that he wanted me to know where he was. I sat with the phone in my hand for a full minute after we hung up. My coat was on the chair beside me. The letter was folded in my inside pocket. My name was on the door behind me. Everything I had built, everything I had chosen, everything I had refused to surrender, and I still did not know if walking toward him was the bravest thing I had ever done, or the most expensive. One more thing. The truth is not finished speaking. Comment truth. If you are ready for the next part, subscribe, because the next chapter starts with a shock.